My name is Melissa, and I'm 32 years old. 3 weeks ago, I received a text from my mother that I never thought I'd see. It was short, cold, and devastating. You're not welcome at Thanksgiving this year. You embarrassed your sister, and we need time apart. I stared at my phone in disbelief. My younger sister Amber had always been the golden child, but this was a new low. I hadn't missed a family Thanksgiving in my entire life, and now I was being cast out like some kind of villain. What had I done that was so unforgivable? I'd told the truth about her boyfriend Troy. And 3 days after Thanksgiving, Troy showed up at my apartment with a confession that would blow everything wide open. Before we dive into this mess, tell me where you're watching from in the comments below. If you're here for family drama that'll make your Thanksgiving look like a Hallmark movie, hit that like button and subscribe because this story is about to get wild. Trust me, you'll want to hear what Troy had to say. Now let's rewind and I'll tell you how I went from being the family scapegoat to the only one who saw the truth coming. Growing up in suburban Phoenix, Arizona, I learned early on that my sister Amber and I were cast in very different roles. Amber was the beautiful one, the one who lit up every room she walked into with her golden hair and easy smile. She was the homecoming queen, the girl everyone wanted to be friends with, the daughter our mother Patricia paraded around like a trophy. I was the smart one, the quiet one who spent Friday nights studying instead of at parties. I graduated as valedictorian, earned a full scholarship to Arizona State University, and built a successful career as a software engineer. But none of that ever seemed to impress our mother the way Amber's charm and beauty did. Patricia made no secret of her favoritism, and, honestly, after 32 years, I'd learned to accept it as just the way things were. When Amber turned 16, our parents bought her a brand new Honda Civic with a bow on top. When I turned 16, Patricia told me that if I wanted a car, I'd need to save up for it myself because it would teach me responsibility. So I worked 20 hours a week at a grocery store while maintaining straight A's, and 6 months later, I bought myself a beat-up Toyota that broke down more often than it ran. When Amber turned 21, Patricia threw her an elaborate birthday party at a fancy hotel with 200 guests, a live band, and a dessert table that looked like something from a wedding. When I turned 21, we went to Olive Garden with just the four of us, and Patricia spent most of the dinner talking about Amber's latest boyfriend. When I got promoted to senior software engineer last year with a $20,000 raise, Patricia said that's nice, honey, and changed the subject within 30 seconds. When Amber got engaged 6 months ago, Patricia cried tears of joy and immediately started planning a wedding that would cost more than my annual salary. Our father Gerald was a good man, but had learned long ago that the path of least resistance was to simply agree with whatever Patricia said. He never stood up for me, never called out the favoritism, never questioned why one daughter was treated like royalty while the other was treated like an afterthought. I think he loved me in his own quiet way, but his love was passive, the kind that doesn't rock the boat or challenge the status quo. So I learned to build my own life, to find validation in my work and my friendships instead of seeking it from my family. I stayed civil at family gatherings, brought nice gifts for birthdays and holidays, and swallowed the resentment that had been simmering inside me since childhood. But beneath my calm exterior, I was tired. Tired of being second place, tired of watching my accomplishments get dismissed while Amber's mediocrity got celebrated, tired of being the family member everyone could ignore without consequence. I didn't know it then, but that resentment was about to reach its breaking point. 6 months before that fateful Thanksgiving, Amber announced at Sunday dinner that she was dating someone new. His name was Troy, and from the moment Patricia met him, she was obsessed. Troy was everything Patricia had ever dreamed of for her precious daughter. Handsome in that catalog model way with perfect teeth and styled hair, successful as a real estate developer with a luxury car and designer suits, and charming enough to make Patricia giggle like a teenager whenever he complimented her cooking. He'd show up to family dinners with expensive wine and flowers for Patricia, and he always knew exactly what to say to make everyone feel special. On the surface, he seemed perfect, but I noticed things that no one else seemed to see, or maybe they just didn't want to see them. Troy was overly attentive to Amber in public, always touching her, always watching her, always positioning himself as the devoted boyfriend. But when he thought no one was paying attention, I'd catch glimpses of something else. The way He'd check her phone when she left it on the table, scrolling through her messages with a casual possessiveness that made my skin crawl. The way He'd make subtle comments about her appearance, disguised as jokes but carrying an edge that felt like criticism. Better watch those calories, babe. Wedding dress season is coming? He'd say with a laugh, and everyone would chuckle along while Amber's smile faltered just slightly. The way He'd interrupt her when she was talking, finishing her sentences or correcting her stories, establishing himself as the authority on everything. And most concerning of all, the way Amber seemed to shrink around him, becoming smaller and more anxious, constantly seeking his approval with her eyes before speaking or making any decision. I tried to talk to Amber about it one afternoon when we were supposed to be having sister time. We were at a coffee shop, and I carefully, gently brought up my concerns. I told her that Troy seemed a bit controlling, that I'd noticed she didn't hang out with her friends as much anymore, that she seemed stressed. Amber's reaction was immediate and defensive. Her face flushed red, and she accused me of being jealous because I was single and she was getting married. She said I'd always been bitter about her happiness, that I couldn't stand to see her have something good. I tried to explain that wasn't true, that I genuinely cared about her well-being, but she wouldn't hear it. And then Patricia walked by our table, on her way to meet a friend, and overheard just enough of the conversation to catch the words Troy and controlling coming from my mouth. That night, I got a phone call from Patricia scolding me like I was a child, telling me that I needed to stop trying to ruin Amber's happiness, that Troy was a wonderful man and I was just envious because no one wanted to marry me. 2 months before Thanksgiving, Troy proposed to Amber at an upscale restaurant with Patricia and Gerald conveniently seated at a nearby table to witness the whole thing. Patricia had known it was coming because Troy had asked for their blessing weeks earlier, and she'd spent that entire time barely able to contain her excitement. The proposal was elaborate, with roses and a photographer and a ring that must have cost a small fortune. Amber said yes, of course, and Patricia rushed over to embrace them both, crying so hard you'd think she was the one getting married. Gerald shook Troy's hand and clapped him on the back, welcoming him to the family with genuine warmth. I got a text about it an hour later with a photo attached, and I sent back congratulations that I tried to make sound sincere. But that night, lying in bed in my quiet apartment, I felt a deep sense of unease that I couldn't shake. Over the following weeks, I watched Amber change in ways that alarmed me. She'd always been social, the kind of person who had plans every weekend and a phone that never stopped buzzing with messages from friends. But now she was always home, always available to Troy, always texting him to let him know where she was and who she was with. Her Instagram, which used to be full of girls' nights and brunch photos, became nothing but couple photos with Troy, carefully curated to show their perfect relationship. She lost weight rapidly, her face becoming gaunt, and her collarbones jutting out sharply. When I asked if she was okay, she insisted everything was perfect, that she was just stressed with wedding planning and excited to fit into her dream dress. But her eyes told a different story, hollow and exhausted. I wanted to grab her by the shoulders and shake her awake, make her see what I was seeing. But every time I tried to voice my concerns, I was shut down, labeled as jealous or negative or bitter. So I watched helplessly as my sister slipped further into what I recognized as an unhealthy relationship, surrounded by a family that was too blinded by Troy's charm and money to see the warning signs that were so obvious to me. 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, my worst fears were confirmed in the most unexpected way. I was at a coffee shop near my office, catching up on some work on a Saturday morning, when I looked up from my laptop and saw Troy sitting at a corner table with a woman I'd never seen before. They weren't just having a casual conversation. His hand was on her thigh, her fingers were playing with his collar, and they were leaning into each other with an intimacy that made their relationship crystal clear. My heart started pounding. I grabbed my phone and quickly snapped a photo, my hands shaking as I tried to be discreet. I watched them for another 10 minutes, my coffee going cold as I witnessed their little display, and then I left before they could notice me. For the next 2 days, I agonized over what to do with that information. I knew that if I went straight to Amber, she'd accuse me of lying or manipulating the photo or making up stories out of jealousy. Patricia would back her up, and I'd be painted as the villain once again. So I made what I thought was a smart decision. I'd confront Troy directly, give him a chance to come clean to Amber himself, and if he didn't, then I'd tell her. I texted Troy asking to meet him, keeping it vague, just saying I needed to talk to him about something important. He agreed surprisingly quickly, probably curious about what I wanted, and we met at a park near his office 2 days later. I showed him the photo on my phone, watching his face carefully for his reaction. For just a split second, his charming mask slipped, and I saw something cold and calculating in his eyes. Then he recovered, putting on a performance of sheepish guilt, saying it wasn't what it looked like, that she was just a friend, that the angle of the photo was misleading. I cut through his excuses and told him plainly, "Tell Amber the truth, or I will." That's when Troy dropped the act entirely. His whole demeanor changed, his voice going flat and threatening. He leaned forward and told me that no one would believe me, that I was known as the jealous, bitter older sister who couldn't stand to see Amber happy. He said Amber would choose him over me every time, and Patricia already thought I was a problem who tried to stir up trouble. He told me to go ahead and try to tell Amber that had already planted enough seeds about my jealousy that anything I said would be dismissed as lies. Then he stood up, straightened his jacket, and walked away, leaving me sitting on that park bench feeling sick to my stomach. But I couldn't just do nothing. That evening, I called Amber and asked if we could meet in person. She said she was too busy with wedding planning. Could we just talk on the phone? I didn't want to do it this way, but I felt like I had no choice. I took a deep breath and told her what I'd seen, describing the coffee shop scene and offering to send her the photo. There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and for a moment I thought maybe she was actually considering what I was saying, but then she erupted. She called me a liar, accused me of photoshopping the image or misinterpreting what I'd seen. She said I'd always been jealous of her, that I couldn't stand that she was getting married while I was still alone, that I was a sad, pathetic person trying to sabotage her happiness. Her words cut deep, each one landing like a punch. I tried to defend myself, tried to explain that I was only trying to protect her, but she wouldn't listen. She hung up on me mid-sentence. 10 minutes later, my phone rang again. It was Patricia, and she was angrier than I'd ever heard her. Amber had called her immediately, and Troy had apparently already gotten to her too, spinning his version of events where I'd manufactured this entire story to break them up. Patricia's voice was shaking with rage as she told me I was toxic, jealous, and cruel. She said Shed raised me better than this, that she was ashamed to call me her daughter, that if I couldn't be happy for my sister, then I was a poison in this family. I tried to interrupt, tried to explain, but she talked over me, her words coming faster and louder. Then Gerald got on the phone, and I felt a flicker of hope that maybe he'd be reasonable, maybe he'd at least hear me out. But he just sighed tiredly and suggested that I apologize to keep the peace, that maybe I'd misunderstood what I saw, that it wasn't worth tearing the family apart over. I told him I wouldn't apologize for telling the truth, and he said that was my choice, but I'd have to live with the consequences. The call ended with Patricia saying she needed time to decide if she even wanted me at Thanksgiving, and I was left sitting alone in my apartment, feeling like I'd just been hit by a truck. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, the official text arrived from Patricia. It was formal and cold, as if she was writing to a business associate rather than her daughter. "Melissa, after much thought and discussion with your father and sister, we've decided it's best if you don't join us for Thanksgiving this year. Your recent behavior has brought nothing but negativity and discord to this family. Thanksgiving is meant to be a time of gratitude and unity, and your presence would disrupt that. Perhaps next year, after you've had time to reflect on your actions and make proper amends, we can revisit this. Until then, we need space." I read that message at least 20 times, each time hoping I'd misunderstood, that it would say something different, but the words remained the same, cold and final. I tried reaching out to my father privately, sending him a text asking if we could talk just the two of us. He called me the next day from his car during his lunch break, speaking in hushed tones like he was afraid Patricia would somehow overhear. He told me he believed I meant well, that he knew I loved my sister, but that I should have kept my concerns to myself instead of causing such a disruption. He said families sometimes need to let things play out naturally, that interfering never helps, and that Troy was probably a good guy who'd take care of Amber. When I asked him if he truly believed that, or if he was just saying what Patricia wanted him to say, he got quiet for a long moment. Then he said softly that it didn't matter what he believed, that keeping the family together was more important than being right. He suggested I send an apology text to smooth things over, just say I was wrong and move on so we could all be together for the holidays. I told him I couldn't apologize for telling the truth, and he sighed and said he'd tried, that the rest was up to me. We hung up, and I realized with painful clarity that my father would never stand up for me, not against Patricia, not for anything. Thanksgiving week arrived, and I spent it alone in my apartment, trying to convince myself I was better off without them. My coworker Bryce had invited me to his Friendsgiving celebration, and I went, grateful for the distraction. His friends were warm and welcoming, and for a few hours, I almost forgot about the family gathering happening across town without me. But when I got home that night and opened Instagram, the reality hit me like a sledgehammer. There were photos everywhere. Amber looking radiant in a burgundy dress, holding a wine glass and smiling at the camera. Troy with his arm possessively around her waist, looking like the picture-perfect fiancé. Gerald carving the turkey while Patricia looked on adoringly. The table set beautifully with fall decorations and candles, and then I saw Patricia's caption, "So grateful for family who lift each other up and celebrate together. Blessed beyond measure." It was clearly a dig at me, a public declaration that I was the problem, the one who tore down instead of lifted up. I sat on my couch staring at those photos, feeling a complex mix of emotions I couldn't quite untangle. There was hurt, deep and aching, at being excluded from something that had been a constant in my life for 32 years. There was anger at the injustice of it all, at being punished for trying to protect my sister. There was loneliness, sharp and hollow, as I realized how isolated it'd become. But underneath all of that was something else, a strange sense of vindication. I knew I was right about Troy. I knew that eventually, the truth would come out, and when it did, everyone would see that I'd been trying to help, not harm. I told myself I was better off without a family that would choose a charming liar over their own daughter. I told myself their rejection said more about them than it did about me. But late that night, lying in the dark, I cried for the family I'd never really had and the acceptance that would never come. 3 days after Thanksgiving, on a quiet Sunday evening, I was home in sweatpants and an old college hoodie, halfway through a Netflix series I wasn't really paying attention to. When my doorbell rang, I almost didn't answer it. I wasn't expecting anyone, and part of me worried it might be Patricia coming to deliver more disappointment in person. But curiosity won out, and I dragged myself off the couch to check the peephole. Standing in the hallway, looking nothing like his usual polished self, was Troy. My heart started racing. I stood there frozen for a moment, trying to decide if I should just pretend I wasn't home. Then he spoke through the door, his voice uncharacteristically tentative. "Melissa, I know you're probably surprised to see me. I really need to talk to you. It's important, please." I opened the door but left the chain lock engaged, peering at him through the gap. He looked terrible. His hair was messy, his clothes rumpled, and there were dark circles under his eyes like he hadn't slept in days. This wasn't the confident, intimidating man who'd threatened me in the park. This was someone who'd been knocked off balance, and I needed to know why. "What do you want, Troy?" I asked, keeping my voice flat and unwelcoming. He rubbed his face with both hands and said, "Can I come in? I need to tell you something, and I'd rather not do it in the hallway." Every instinct told me this was a bad idea, but my curiosity was stronger than my caution. I closed the door, removed the chain, and opened it again, stepping back to let him in but keeping a careful distance between us. Troy walked into my living room and sank onto my couch like his legs couldn't hold him anymore. He put his head in his hands, and for a long moment, he just sat there in silence. I remained standing, arms crossed, waiting for whatever game he was about to play. Then he looked up at me, and what he said next knocked the ground out from under me. "You were right. About everything. I'm exactly what you thought I was." I stared at him, searching his face for signs that this was some kind of trick, some new manipulation. "What are you talking about?" I asked carefully. He took a shaky breath and started explaining, the words tumbling out like he'd been holding them in for too long. Amber had found out about the other woman, but not from my warning. The woman's friend had seen them together multiple times and finally decided to message Amber on Instagram with photos and screenshots of their conversations. Amber had confronted Troy on Thanksgiving night after everyone else had left their parents' house. The fight had been explosive. Troy had tried to deny it at first, but the evidence was overwhelming, and eventually, had admitted to not just one affair, but several over the course of their relationship. Amber had thrown her engagement ring at him and told him to get out, that the wedding was off, that she never wanted to see him again. Patricia and Gerald had been upstairs and came running down when they heard the screaming, walking in just in time to witness the end of the relationship. And here's the part that made my blood boil. Even with the truth laid bare, even with undeniable proof of Troy's infidelity, Patricia and Amber were somehow blaming me even more. Patricia's logic, as Troy explained it, was that if I hadn't stirred up trouble and planted seeds of doubt, Amber would have married Troy in blissful ignorance and been happy, never knowing about the affairs. In Patricia's twisted worldview, what Amber didn't know couldn't hurt her, and Ed ruined that possibility by forcing reality into the open. Troy looked at me with something that might have been genuine remorse, though I still didn't trust him enough to be sure. He said that Patricia had actually called him the day after Thanksgiving, not to yell at him but to commiserate about how I was a destructive force in the family, how Ed always caused problems, how this whole situation was somehow more my fault than his. He said had realized, sitting in his empty apartment nursing his bruised ego, that I'd been the only person who actually tried to protect Amber. I'd seen him for what he was and tried to warn her, and had been punished for it while had been embraced and celebrated. He said he felt guilty about that, about how I'd been treated, and he wanted to make it right. He offered to go to Patricia and Amber and tell them the truth, that I'd confronted him weeks ago, that I'd tried to warn Amber, that I'd been right all along. I looked at him sitting on my couch, and suddenly I understood what was really happening. "Why are you really here, Troy?" I asked quietly. He shifted uncomfortably and admitted the full truth. Amber wouldn't talk to him. Shed blocked his number, blocked him on social media, refused to see him, and had realized, in the days since the breakup, that he actually had feelings for her, real ones, maybe for the first time in his life. He wanted her back. He thought that if he went to the family and validated my concerns, admitted that I'd been trying to help, maybe Amber would see him as honest and changed, and maybe Shed give him another chance. I almost laughed at the audacity of it. His motives were completely selfish. He didn't care about clearing my name out of any sense of justice or guilt. He just wanted to use the truth as a tool to win back the woman he'd betrayed. But even as I recognized his selfishness, I also saw an opportunity. His testimony, regardless of his motivations, could prove to my family that I'd been telling the truth. I told him to leave, that I needed time to think about whether I wanted his help or wanted anything to do with this situation at all. He nodded and stood up, looking small and defeated, and let himself out. I locked the door behind him and leaned against it, my mind spinning with possibilities and doubts. The next morning, I called my Aunt Diane, Patricia's younger sister who'd always been kinder to me and more objective about family dynamics. Diane lived in Tucson and wasn't at the Thanksgiving dinner, but I knew she'd have heard about the drama through the family grapevine. She answered on the second ring, and I could hear the sympathy in her voice before I even asked any questions. "Oh, honey, I've been thinking about you," she said warmly. "Your mother called me yesterday. I heard about Amber and Troy." I asked her to tell me everything she knew, and Diane filled in the gaps. Amber was devastated, not just heartbroken, but humiliated. Shed shared the engagement announcement widely on social media, posted photos of her ring, gushed about her perfect relationship to anyone who would listen. Now, the breakup was public too, and she was facing questions and pity from everyone who'd celebrated with her. Patricia had gone into full damage control mode, Diane explained, crafting a narrative to share with friends and extended family. In Patricia's version of events, Amber had discovered Troy's infidelity and immediately ended things, showing great strength and self-respect. But the reason Troy had strayed in the first place, Patricia was suggesting, was because of the negative energy and discord I'd brought into the family. Patricia was actually implying that my accusations and warnings had somehow pushed Troy to cheat, had created instability that damaged his relationship with Amber. It was absurd, illogical, and yet Diane said several family members had accepted this narrative without question because it came from Patricia, who was seen as the matriarch. When I asked what Diane thought of all this, she sighed heavily and said something that stuck with me. Your mother has always rewritten reality to avoid admitting she was wrong about anything. And Amber learned that skill from her. You deserve so much better than the way this family treats you, Melissa. That evening, my phone rang with a number I almost didn't recognize because she called so rarely. Amber. My finger hovered over the decline button, but something made me answer. Hello, I said cautiously. Amber's voice was thick with tears, barely coherent at first. Can we meet? She asked. I need to talk to you. Despite every self-protective instinct screaming at me to say no, I agreed. We met an hour later at a neutral coffee shop neither of us frequented, a place where we wouldn't run into anyone who knew us. When I walked in and saw Amber sitting at a corner table, I barely recognized her. She'd lost even more weight, her face was puffy and red from crying, and she wore no makeup, which was unusual for someone who normally wouldn't leave the house without a full face. She looked broken in a way I'd never seen before. I sat down across from her, and she started talking before I could even say hello. I'm not here to apologize, she said, her voice defensive despite the tears. I felt my guard go up immediately, bracing myself for whatever attack was coming. But I need to understand why you couldn't just let me be happy, she continued. Why did you have to say those things about Troy? Why couldn't you just keep your opinions to yourself? I stared at her in disbelief, my anger rising. Happy, I repeated. Amber, he was cheating on you, multiple times, with multiple women. How is that happiness? She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. But I didn't know that. I was happy in my ignorance. I was planning my dream wedding, imagining my future, feeling loved and chosen. You took that away from me. I leaned forward, trying to keep my voice calm even though I wanted to scream. That wasn't real happiness. That was delusion. You were living in a fantasy built on lies. Amber broke down completely then, putting her face in her hands and sobbing so hard her whole body shook. When she finally looked up at me, her expression was tortured. I knew something was wrong, she admitted in a whisper. I knew Troy was controlling. I knew he was checking my phone and criticizing me and isolating me from my friends. I felt myself disappearing, becoming smaller, losing who I was. But I didn't want to see it because I wanted the fairy tale so badly. I wanted the big wedding and the perfect husband and the life that everyone would envy. I wanted Mom to be proud of me. And you trying to show me the truth felt like you were trying to take away the only thing I had that made me valuable. Her words hit me like a physical blow. I felt a complicated mix of sympathy for her pain and frustration at her inability to take responsibility. Amber, I said softly, your value doesn't come from landing a husband or having a perfect wedding. You're more than that. She shook her head bitterly. You don't understand what it's like to be me. You've never understood. You think being the pretty one is such a privilege, but do you know what it's actually like? Mom never cared about my grades or my interests or my thoughts. She only cared about how I looked and whether I could attract a successful man. That's all I've ever been valued for, my appearance and my ability to secure a good marriage. You were the smart one, the accomplished one, the one who built a career and an independent life. I was just the pretty package that was supposed to be handed off from our father to a husband. So yes, when Troy proposed, I clung to that because it was the only form of success I was allowed to have. And when you tried to show me it was fake, it felt like you were telling me I'd failed at the one thing I was supposed to be good at. I sat there absorbing her words, understanding for the first time that Patricia's favoritism had damaged Amber in different but equally painful ways. We'd both been trapped in roles assigned to us, neither of us valued for our full selves. But understanding her pain didn't erase mine, and it didn't change the fact that she still couldn't acknowledge that I'd been trying to help. I told her as much. I tried to protect you because I love you, even though you've never appreciated me, I said quietly. But you threw that back in my face. You called me jealous and bitter and cruel. You let Mom turn you against me. You chose Troy over your own sister. Amber looked down at her coffee cup, unable to meet my eyes. Mom says you've always been jealous of me, she said weakly, parroting Patricia's words. I've been envious of the way Mom treats you, I corrected her. But I've never wanted to hurt you. There's a difference, and if you can't see that, then I don't know if we can fix this. The conversation continued in painful circles, neither of us able to give the other what we needed. Amber couldn't bring herself to say thank you or admit it'd been right. I couldn't forgive being treated like a villain for telling the truth. When she finally left, saying she needed space, I sat alone at that table for another hour, feeling the weight of a relationship that might be too broken to repair. I realized that Amber might never change, that Patricia definitely wouldn't, and that waiting for them to see me clearly was a waste of my life. 1 week after my painful coffee shop meeting with Amber, Troy made good on his offer to set the record straight, though not in the way it expected or asked him to. He showed up unannounced at my parents' house on a Sunday afternoon, a time when he knew Amber would be there helping Patricia sort through wedding cancellations and send back deposits. When Patricia opened the door and saw him standing there, she tried to close it in his face, but Troy pushed his way in, insisting he needed to speak to all of them. Gerald came to the door to see what the commotion was about, and Amber appeared from the kitchen, her face going pale when she saw her ex-fiancé standing in the living room. Patricia told Troy he had 30 seconds to leave before she called the police, but Troy held up his hands in a placating gesture and said there was something they all needed to hear, including me. Patricia refused outright, saying there was no reason to involve me in anything. Troy stood his ground and insisted that I had to be part of this conversation, that what he needed to say concerned me directly. Gerald, always the conflict avoider, suggested that maybe they should hear him out, and after a tense standoff, he pulled out his phone and called me. My father's voice was awkward and uncomfortable as he asked if I could come over to the house, that Troy was there and wanted to talk to all of us. Every fiber of my being wanted to say no, to refuse to walk back into that house where it'd been so thoroughly rejected. But curiosity won out. I needed to know what Troy was going to say and whether he'd actually follow through on his promise to tell the truth. I drove to my parents' house for the first time since before Thanksgiving, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. When I walked through the front door, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Patricia glared at me like I was an intruder. Amber looked at the floor, Gerald stood uncomfortably by the fireplace, and Troy stood in the center of the living room, looking nervous but determined. I stayed near the door, keeping my exit route clear, and waited for whatever was about to happen. Troy cleared his throat and began speaking, addressing all of us but focusing mostly on Patricia and Amber. "I need to tell you the truth about what happened before Thanksgiving," he started. "The whole truth, not the version you've been told." Patricia interrupted immediately, her voice sharp. "We know what happened. You cheated on Amber. It's over. Why are you here?" Troy nodded, acknowledging her point. "Yes, I cheated. But what you don't know is the full story about Melissa's involvement." All eyes turned to me, and I felt my stomach drop. Troy continued, explaining how weeks before Thanksgiving, I'd seen him with another woman at a coffee shop, how I'd taken a photo and confronted him privately in a park, giving him a chance to come clean to Amber before I told her myself, how he'd threatened me, told me no one would believe me, weaponized my reputation as the jealous sister against me, how I'd tried to warn Amber anyway, and the entire family had turned on me, called me toxic and cruel, uninvited me from Thanksgiving. Troy's voice was steady as he laid out the timeline, painting a clear picture of my attempts to protect my sister and the punishment I'd received for it. "Melissa was right about me from the beginning," Troy said, looking directly at Patricia. "She saw through my act when no one else did. She tried to warn Amber, and instead of listening to her, you all attacked her. You called her jealous and bitter when she was actually the only person brave enough to tell the truth. I'm not here to make excuses for myself. I'm a terrible person who doesn't deserve Amber, but Melissa doesn't deserve what you did to her. She was trying to protect her sister, and you punished her for it." The room was silent for a moment, everyone processing what they'd just heard. I held my breath, waiting to see if this would change anything, if hearing the truth from Troy himself would make them see me differently. Patricia's face hardened, her jaw clenching. "Get out of my house, Troy," she said coldly. Then she turned to me, and I saw not apology or remorse in her eyes but renewed anger. "And Melissa, this doesn't change anything. You embarrassed your sister. You should have come to me first instead of confronting Troy. You should have handled this differently." I felt like I'd been slapped. "I did come to you. I said, my voice rising. You called me jealous and toxic. You refused to listen. Patricia stood up, drawing herself to her full height. You made a private family matter public. You created drama where there didn't need to be any. The way you handled this was inappropriate and hurtful. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Even with Troy standing right there confirming everything I'd said, even with the truth laid bare, Patricia was still twisting the narrative to make me the villain. Gerald remained silent, his eyes fixed on the carpet, refusing to engage. Amber was crying again, overwhelmed by the confrontation. Troy looked between all of us, realizing his confession hadn't had the healing effect he'd hoped for. Mrs. Walker, with all due respect, Melissa was in an impossible situation. Troy tried to argue. She did exactly what Patricia cut him off. I don't need you to tell me how to understand my own daughter. You've done enough damage to this family. Leave, now. Troy looked at me, a silent apology in his eyes, and then he left, the front door closing behind him with a soft click that felt deafening in the silence. I stood there looking at my mother, my father, my sister, waiting for someone to say something that would make this right. Patricia turned to me, her expression cold. Are you satisfied now? You've dragged all this up again, brought that man back into our lives, created more pain for your sister. Is this what you wanted? I felt something break inside me, a final thread of hope snapping. What I wanted, I said slowly, was for my family to believe me. What I wanted was for someone to care that I was telling the truth. What I wanted was for my sister to be protected from a man who would have made her miserable, but clearly, that was too much to ask. Patricia's eyes flashed. You're being dramatic. This is exactly why, but I held up my hand, cutting her off. No. I'm done listening to you rewrite reality. I'm done being the scapegoat. I'm done with all of this. Standing in that living room, surrounded by the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, but had instead made me feel like a burden my entire life, I made a decision. I straightened my shoulders, looked each of them in the eye, and said the words I'd needed to say for 32 years. I'm done. Patricia's eyebrows shot up. What do you mean, you're done? Her tone was dismissive, like I was a child threatening to run away from home. I'm done trying to earn your approval, Mom, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. I'm done being the scapegoat for everything that goes wrong in this family. I'm done being punished for telling the truth. I'm done pretending that the way you treat me is normal or acceptable. I'm just done. Patricia laughed, actually laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. You're being dramatic, Melissa. This is what you always do. You make everything about you, play the victim, act like you're so mistreated when really you just can't handle that Amber gets attention. I felt rage rising in my chest, hot and powerful. No, Mom, this is what you always do. You gaslight me into thinking I'm the problem when really you've been playing favorites since we were children. You've dismissed my accomplishments, ignored my feelings, and turned my sister against me. And when I tried to protect Amber from making the biggest mistake of her life, you punished me for it. You uninvited me from Thanksgiving, called me toxic, and even now, even with Troy himself confirming that I was right about everything, you still can't admit that you were wrong. Gerald finally spoke up, his voice placating. Melissa, honey, let's all just calm down and talk about this rationally. Nobody needs to say things they'll regret. I turned to my father, this man who'd stood by silently while his wife destroyed one daughter's self-worth to build up the others. No, Dad. You've been telling me to calm down my whole life. You've been telling me to keep the peace, don't rock the boat, just accept the way things are. But you've never once stood up for me. Not when Mom bought Amber a car but made me buy my own. Not when she threw Amber an elaborate party but took me to Olive Garden. Not when she dismissed my career success but cried tears of joy over Amber's engagement. Not even now, when the truth is staring you in the face. You've never chosen me. Not once. Gerald's face crumpled, hurt evident in his expression, but he didn't argue because he knew I was right. I turned to Amber, who was still standing with her arms wrapped around herself, tears streaming down her face. I love you, Amber. I always have. But I can't keep setting myself on fire to keep you warm. You need to figure out your own life, make your own choices, and deal with your own consequences. I tried to protect you, and you threw it back in my face. I can't keep doing this. Amber's voice was small and broken. So you're just going to abandon me? When I need you most. Her words were designed to make me feel guilty, and part of me did feel that familiar pull to stay, to comfort, to sacrifice myself for her well-being. But I'd finally learned that protecting myself wasn't the same as abandoning her. I'm not abandoning you. I said firmly. I'm protecting myself. There's a difference. You have parents who love you, friends who support you, and the resources to heal from this. But I can't be your punching bag anymore. I can't be the person you blame when things go wrong in your life. I started walking toward the door, my legs shaky but determined. Patricia's voice stopped me. If you walk out that door, Melissa, don't expect to be welcomed back. I mean it this time. I turned to look at her one last time. This woman who'd given birth to me but never really seen me. I don't expect to be welcomed back, Mom. And honestly, that's a relief. I've spent 32 years trying to be good enough for you, and I finally realize I never will be. Not because I'm not enough, but because you'll never be capable of seeing me clearly. Amber's voice cut through the tension, urgent and tearful. Wait, Melissa, wait. I paused at the door, my hand on the knob. Amber took a few steps toward me, wiping her eyes. I'm sorry, she said, and those two words hung in the air between us. I'm sorry for not believing you. I'm sorry for letting Mom turn me against you. I'm sorry for calling you jealous and bitter when you were just trying to help me. You were right about Troy, and I should have listened. It was the first real apology I'd ever received from my sister, and it meant more than I could express. My eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, I softened. Thank you. Amber, that means more than you know. She took another step closer. Are you really not coming back? Are you really done with all of us? I looked at her. This sister I'd loved and resented in equal measure my whole life. Not unless things change, I said honestly. And I don't think they will. Mom will never admit she was wrong. Dad will never stand up to her. And you'll always be caught between wanting her approval and building your own life. I can't keep living in this cycle. It's killing me, Patricia interjected, her voice sharp with anger. This is ridiculous, Melissa. You're throwing away your family over a misunderstanding, over hurt feelings, over your inability to just get along. I turned to her one last time. It's not a misunderstanding, Mom. It's a pattern. A pattern of you choosing who you love more, who you believe more, who you defend more. And I've been on the losing end of that pattern my entire life. I'm not throwing away my family. I'm finally choosing myself. There's a difference. I opened the door and walked out into the cool evening air, leaving behind the house I'd grown up in and the family that had never really felt like home. As I drove away, my phone buzzed with a text from Aunt Diane, who must have heard about the confrontation already through the family network. I heard what happened. I'm proud of you. You're stronger than all of them combined. I pulled over and cried, big heaving sobs that had been building for 32 years, but underneath the grief was something else, something that felt like freedom, something that felt like the first breath after being underwater too long. I'd finally chosen myself, and even though it hurt, it also felt like the first honest thing I'd done in years. 3 months passed, and winter gave way to early spring. I spent those months in therapy with Dr. Karen Sullivan, a kind woman with gray hair and gentle eyes who helped me understand the patterns I'd been trapped in my whole life. She taught me words like scapegoating and gaslighting and golden child syndrome, giving names to experiences I'd always felt but never understood. She helped me see that Patricia's favoritism wasn't about anything wrong with me but about her own issues, her own need to live vicariously through a beautiful daughter, her own inability to value substance over surface. She helped me grieve the mother I'd never had while accepting the mother who actually existed. And slowly, painfully, I started to heal. I built what Dr. Sullivan called a chosen family, surrounding myself with people who actually saw me and valued me. Bryce from work became a close friend, someone I could call when I was feeling low or needed to laugh. I joined a book club full of smart, funny women who challenged my thinking and celebrated my opinions. I reconnected with college friends I'd lost touch with over the years, building back relationships that had fallen away when I'd been too focused on trying to win my family's approval. I blocked Patricia and Gerald on social media, unable to bear seeing their posts that pretended everything was fine. But I left Amber unblocked, and she texted me occasionally, small talk mostly, testing the waters to see if we could find a new way to relate to each other. One day in late February, Amber asked if we could meet for lunch. I agreed cautiously, my hopes tempered by past disappointments. We met at a casual restaurant neither of us had been to before, neutral territory with no memories attached. When Amber walked in, I barely recognized her, but in a good way this time. Shed gained back the weight Shed lost. Her face had color in it again, and there was something different in her eyes, something that looked almost like confidence. We ordered food and made awkward small talk for a few minutes before Amber took a deep breath and said, "I've been seeing a therapist too. I felt a spark of hope. That's really good, Amber." She nodded, playing with her napkin nervously. "Doctor, Martinez has been helping me understand a lot of things. About Mom, about me, about us, about the way I was raised to think my only value was in being pretty and getting married. She's helping me see how damaging that was, how it set me up to stay in unhealthy relationships because I thought that was my purpose." Amber looked up at me, and I saw genuine remorse in her expression. "I'm starting to understand that what Mom did to you was wrong, and what I did to you was wrong. You weren't jealous of me, you were trying to protect me, and I couldn't see it because I'd been taught that you were the problem, that you were the one who caused trouble." She paused, gathering her courage. "I know I already apologized, but I need to say it again. I'm sorry, Melissa. I'm really, truly sorry for not believing you, for choosing Troy over you, for letting Mom turn me against you. You deserved so much better." I felt tears prickling my eyes. This was the sister I'd always wanted, the one who could see clearly and take responsibility and meet me as an equal. "Thank you for saying that," I said quietly. "It means everything," Amber continued, telling me about the changes Shed been making in her life. Shed enrolled in community college and was taking classes toward becoming a registered nurse, something Shed always been interested in but Patricia had discouraged because it wasn't glamorous enough. Shed reconnected with old friends Shed lost touch with during her relationship with Troy. Shed started setting boundaries with Patricia, which wasn't easy but was necessary for her own mental health. "I'm not the same person I was 3 months ago," Amber said. "I'm trying to figure out who I am when I'm not just being Mom's perfect daughter or someone's girlfriend. It's hard, and I mess up a lot, but I'm trying." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "I'm proud of you, Amber. That takes real courage." She squeezed back, her eyes glistening. "I want to have a real relationship with you, if you're willing. Not as Mom's daughters, not as the perfect one and the smart one, but as actual sisters who see each other for who we really are. I know I have to earn back your trust, and am willing to work for it, however long it takes." I felt a complicated mix of emotions, hope and caution intertwined. "I want that too," I admitted, "but it's going to take time. Trust doesn't come back overnight, and I need to protect myself while we figure this out." Amber nodded vigorously. "I understand completely. We can take it as slow as you need. Maybe we start with once a month, just lunch or coffee, and we build from there." I agreed, and for the first time in our lives, I felt like we were actually seeing each other as people instead of roles. I asked about our parents, and Amber's expression grew complicated. "Mom is still Mom," she said with a sigh. "She insists you overreacted, that you're being dramatic, that families are supposed to forgive and move on. She doesn't understand why you won't just apologize and come back. Dad asks about you sometimes, usually when Mom isn't around. I think he feels guilty, but he's never going to stand up to her." I nodded, having expected as much. "And Troy?" I asked, curious despite myself. Amber laughed, a bitter sound without humor. "Blocked on everything. Last I heard through mutual friends, he's already engaged to someone new, some woman he met at a bar 2 weeks after we broke up. I feel sorry for her, whoever she is." We shared a look of understanding, both grateful that Amber had escaped when she did. As I drove home that afternoon, I found myself reflecting on the entire journey. I thought about how the hardest thing I'd ever done was walk away from people who were supposed to love me unconditionally but only loved me when I stayed small and quiet and didn't challenge their comfortable lies. I thought about how being right doesn't always mean you'll be vindicated, that sometimes people will choose a convenient lie over an uncomfortable truth no matter how much evidence you present. I thought about how protecting yourself isn't selfish but necessary, that you can't pour from an empty cup, that you can't light yourself on fire to keep others warm. I thought about how family isn't always about blood but about who shows up for you, who believes you, who celebrates your truth instead of punishing you for it. That evening, I sat at my desk and opened my journal. Something Dr. Sullivan had encouraged me to keep as a way of processing my experiences. I wrote, I spent 32 years trying to earn my mother's approval, chasing something that was never really available to me because the problem was never me. The problem was her inability to see beyond her own narrow definitions of success and worth. I wrote, Amber is trying, really trying, and that's more than I expected. Maybe we can build something real between us, something not based on competition or comparison but on genuine sisterhood. It won't be easy, and it won't be quick, but it might be possible. I wrote, I don't regret telling the truth about Troy, even though the truth cost me more than I ever imagined it would. I'd rather be alone and honest than surrounded by people who demand I lie to keep the peace. Integrity isn't negotiable, even when the price is high. The following weeks and months continued the slow process of healing. I started dating someone I met through the book club, a kind man named Wesley who listened when I talked and didn't run away when I told him about my complicated family situation. Bryce invited me to his family's summer barbecue, and I experienced what a functional family looked like. People who disagreed without attacking, who apologized when they were wrong, who celebrated each other's successes without jealousy. Amber and I met monthly as promised, slowly building trust, sharing our therapy insights, supporting each other's growth. We weren't magically fixed, but we were trying, and that counted for something. In late October, Bryce approached me at work with an invitation. My family does this big Friendsgiving thing every year, the weekend before actual Thanksgiving, he said. It's pretty casual, lots of food, games, people bringing friends and partners. You're welcome to come if you want. No pressure, but I think you'd have fun. I felt a wave of emotion, remembering last year's Thanksgiving spent alone and excluded. This year could be different. This year, I could choose to spend it with people who actually wanted me there. I'd love to come. I told him, meaning it completely. As Thanksgiving approached, I felt not the dread I'd felt last year but something like excitement. I was building a new life, one where I was valued and seen and celebrated for who I actually was. The night before Friendsgiving, I wrote one final journal entry about this chapter of my life. I've learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is save yourself, even when everyone tells you that you're being selfish or dramatic or cruel for setting boundaries. I've learned that the people who are supposed to protect you are sometimes the ones you need protection from, and that's a painful truth but a necessary one to accept. I've learned that family isn't always about blood but about who shows up for you consistently, who believes you when you speak your truth, who celebrates your growth instead of punishing you for changing. Most importantly, I've learned that I am enough exactly as I am, that I don't need anyone's approval or validation to have worth, that my value isn't determined by my mother's ability to see it. In the end, I protected myself when no one else would, and that was enough. That will always be enough. As I sit here now, almost a year later, I can tell you that my relationship with Patricia never healed. She still believes I'm the problem, still tells anyone who'll listen that I abandoned my family over nothing, still refuses to acknowledge her role in any of the pain. Gerald calls occasionally, awkward conversations where he asks surface-level questions about my life but never addresses the elephant in the room. And that's okay. I've accepted that some relationships can't be fixed, that some people will never change, that I can only control my own actions and responses. But Amber and I are building something new, something real, meeting every few weeks and slowly becoming the sisters we should have been all along. And I've found my people, my chosen family, the ones who show up and stay and believe me and celebrate me. So let me ask you this. because I know some of you watching are going through similar situations with your own families. Have you ever been the scapegoat in your family? Have you ever told the truth and been punished for it? Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and protecting yourself? Drop a comment below and share your story, because I promise you're not alone in this. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel for more real stories about family, relationships, and finding the courage to choose yourself. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that it's okay to set boundaries, even with family, especially with family. Thank you so much for listening to my story, for being here, for being part of this community. I hope wherever you are in your own journey, you find the strength to protect yourself and the wisdom to know you deserve better. May you find your chosen family. May you heal from the wounds of your past, and may you always remember that choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next story.